So what I said to get was 2 or 3 skeins, and I think it depends on if you're going to want fringe, of the Lion Brand woolies, which is I think it's like 70% acrylic, 30% wool, or something like that. So it's got enough wool to make it breathe and make it really kind of solid feeling, but enough acrylic that it is washable, machine washable.
Yeah.
If you look at the label of any yarn that you buy, that'll tell you whether the thing that you're making with it is going to be machine washable. And also less expensive when you're not using a fully wool. And a lot of people just like the acrylic softer. Some of the pure wool things, depending, the merino softer, but or just a regular 100% wool can be scratchy, itchy, doesn't have that softness.
Yeah, that's what my mother was mentioning.
It's true. I mean, a full acrylic tends to get fuzzy, so I'm not a huge fan of that, but this is a nice blend. And the bulky, the super bulky, this is actually a super bulky yarn, that will go faster. You're going to be able to use a larger hook. You're going to be able to use a, you know, you're not going to need as many stitches to go across to make a nice wide scarf, and you're not going to need as many rows in order to complete your items. So bigger is better when you're learning, because you get that instant gratification. So Nanny, I'm sorry, I know you wanted me to use smaller yarn, but I'm not going to, so there. So one of the things to start with, the first thing you're going to do is make a slip knot. And I know you probably have made slip knots before in your life. There's a lot of reasons to make a slip knot throughout what you might be doing with string or whatever. But I'm going to show you how to do it with the yarn, so that when you are leaving a tail on your
Oh, Jill has a question.
Are we recording this?
Yes.
Are we okay, thank you.
So that when you do make your item, you might as well make that your first piece of fringe.
Ah, okay.
So
yep.
What I do is I actually measure it kind of from the line of my wrist here to the tip of my middle finger.
Okay.
And it's not an exact science, but it's kind of, you know, that. I don't pull the yarn too tightly, because you figure when the fringe is hanging, you're not pulling it tightly. And just kind of in general leave about that much, maybe a little bit more than what you would need.
Mm-hmm.
Because that can be a single piece of fringe on the end of your scarf when you're done. And then from that, you take the rest of the yarn. Here's the shorter piece that's hanging, right? I've got that shorter piece kind of laying across my hand. And I'm taking the rest of the yarn and making a loop over. And then I'm going to flop that down, so that I've got the piece kind of showing through the circle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to pull up that piece until you've started to create kind of a slip knot. And now I've got the piece hanging, and if I pull on it to make the loop bigger, the fringe piece kind of shortens.
Yeah.
Some people make it the other way, so that when they pull on it, the longer piece that's attached to the rope ball of yarn tightens up or loosens. But I think doing it with this fringe piece makes more sense. You don't want to really infringe on the body of the item you're making. You don't want that to have a variable situation going on. So I think this makes the most sense. So I can do it again just to show you again, because sometimes people go back and go, what the heck did she just do? I kind of make the length just going down to my wrist here. Then I make a loop with the piece of yarn that's attached to the ball of yarn, which is a little off camera here, I'll move it. So you make the loop so that, again, on your hand, it's looping with the longer piece over the top and the shorter piece down below. And then fold it over and pull through that shorter piece, kind of holding on to it so it slides up a little bit, so that you keep that length of fringe. And now you've got, and you know, you can pull it as tight as you want. It doesn't have to be super tight, but tightly to finish off that knot there. And then if I put it on my hook and on that, it'll tighten up. With this type of hook, because it gets narrow up here, you want to pull it down to the body of the hook. that is actually your 16 millimeter is where the handle part is. So
Okay.
you don't want to like leave it up here and pull it tight. It'll be way too tight when you get going. So you kind of keep it here to measure it out and measure its size. And then you hold, so that's your first stitch really. This little slip stitch is, or what do you call it there? Your stitch there that you put on there is the first stitch you're going to do. And now you've got the longer length. The short length is dangling for now, okay? So this is dangling. Hold the longer length in your hand and hold the shorter piece. I usually hold that when I'm first starting between my thumb and forefinger of the right hand, because I'm right-handed, and I'm holding the hook, so the hook hand. And you're going to take the long piece and you're going to wrap it around the back of the hook, okay? So I took this, it's attached, and I'm going to move the rest of this out of the way now. You know I have a ball of yarn. You don't need to see it anymore. So I'm going to take this longer piece, and I'm going to wrap it around the back of the hook to the front again, making it look like I have 2 stitches on here.
Okay.
Now make sure you get a little bit of give here. You don't want the slip, what do you call this stitch here? Not the slip stitch, but
The loop?
yeah, the first loop. You don't want it to be too tight.
Okay.
So don't like death grip tighten it. You want it to be loose enough that you can see a little bit of air through it. You can kind of see I've got a little bit of air going on there. It's not right up against it. And then when you wrap around from behind the next one, you do the same thing. You don't tighten it too terribly tight. And now I'm going to grab, like pinch here, this where the knot is, and I'm going to pull it up and slide it over the top of the hook. So now I once again have 1 stitch on there, and I've created 1 chain, and that's what this is. It's a single chain. So we're going to create 12 chains.
Okay.
So it's going to be the same thing again. You don't want it to be too tight. You want it to be nice and loose so you can see sky through it. Let's see if I can get my hand out of the way. Kind of see how loose it is, because you're going to want to be able to poke your thing through it again when we get back to do the second row. So you really do want it to be nice and loose and open.
So you just keep plopping or putting that original loop over the top.
No.
No.
So here's the original loop,
Yeah.
right? We've put a chain stitch into it.
Yeah.
So that's our first chain. We're going to do another chain stitch. Slide it up. And now we've got 2 chain stitches.
Ah, okay. All right.
12 of those. But eventually, when we come back around the row, we're going to be inserting into these chains that we're making. So you want to make sure they're nice and big.
Okay.
So going around again, sliding it up and pulling it through. That's my 3rd chain. I've got 3. Going to do this 8 more times. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'm not going to be happy with it at the end because I never am. 11 and 12. Okay, so I'm going to put it down on my table.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take a drink. I'm going to be like, holy crap. Finish the first row.
And this is the part I'm going to be interested in, because I know I'm going to be that person that needs to kind of go back and do it multiple times before I'm happy with how taut it is.
So let's look at it together and see what we may hate and love about this first run through that I did. My hands were awkward because I'm trying to hold it under the camera. So my tension wasn't even, perfectly even. It wasn't bad though, I have to say. It wasn't terrible. And you can count them. So let's make sure I have as many as I think I do, because I could have miscounted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's a little tight, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Okay.
So I'm not thrilled with the tension just because it's a little uneven, but the next row is going to tell the tale because I'm going to be kind of messing up the tension of it as I insert into each stitch anyway.
Okay.
So there's no need for panic at this stage in the game if it doesn't look perfectly perfect. But you definitely, you know, you don't want to have anything where one of the stitches is really jutting out really far because that will never tighten up and you'll always be annoyed by it. And you don't want to have a situation where one of them is really super tight because that will never loosen up to your satisfaction and you're going to be irritated by that. So, you know, there's no shame in ripping it out. There's no shame in getting 3 rows in and ripping it out. I've done that too. But in general, it's relatively forgiving just because you're already going to be going back through it and stabbing into it as you do your next row. So one thing that might throw off your tension as you're going is if your yarn is not nice and you know, you haven't given yourself enough of a lead on it and it starts tugging on the yarn ball, that could cause your tension to get a little bit off and really throw you for a loop. But other than that, not too terrible. So this next row is going to be a little bit different than all the other rows you're going to do because we're going to be inserting into the chain row. Once we're past this, it's going to look slightly different, but it's not going to be different stitches or anything else. It's just going to be a little bit different when you stab into each stitch for the next row. So let me just, I want to make sure I'm going to do a sanity check with the instructions. So we have created the slip knot and we have chained 12. The next step is going to be to single crochet into the second chain from the hook. Okay, so I'll show you what that means. And then you're gonna, let me stop sharing. So Rachel, are you caught up? Do you have a chain of 12?
I do not. I'm just focusing on what you're doing now. I'll go back and play with this myself tonight.
Okay, totally makes sense. I think that's how I did it in the first place too.
Yeah.
So you don't count what's on your hook as a stitch, even though it eventually will be. You ignore that. So this is the first chain right here. Okay, let me lay it back down so we can kind of look. I hope you can see this.
Yep.
So this is the first chain, the first one from the loop that's on the hook. And then there's the second chain that's right next to that, okay? So I'm going to single crochet into the second chain after the hook. So I'm going to go in there, I'm going to take my hook, and I'm going to stab it into the top of that chain, okay?
Yep.
So now I have 2 stitches on my hook. I'm going to tighten up a little bit, not a lot, okay? I don't want to have too much slack on that first stitch that was on there, and I had stretched it up, but I'm not going to tighten it up much. It's going to be mostly looking pretty darn loose. And then with these 2 stitches, I'm now going to bring this yarn around the front. It's mostly already in the front anyway. And I'm going to hold this here, and I'm going to slide this first loop up and over. And then I'm going to wrap around again from the back, and I'm going to slide the other 2 loops up and over.
Ah, okay.
And that, my friends, is our very first single crochet stitch.
Okay.
So some people like to mark the first stitch so that they know where it is. It has to do with making sure that you're not putting too many stitches in the next row. So you can put in a stitch marker. That's what these are. This is an open stitch marker. They also make closed ones that are sort of like clothespins. And I'm just going to loop it around this part of the stitch. I'm not entirely sure I'm ever looping it in the right place. Perhaps I should be looping it up top. But for now, I'm going to loop it down here and we'll see how it goes.
So I could use a, what do you call it, paper clip?
You could use a paper clip. In fact, that's what I did because these were on back order and I was so sad because I really wanted to use them. And I said I was using paper clips like an animal, and they like shipped me an extra case of them. Apparently they find me amusing. So well, that's our very first single crochet stitch.
Okay.
So we've just done that into this first stitch. Where I always go wrong is judging where the actual stitch was, and I end up at the very end with not enough crochets. So we'll see if I get it right. But from here, let's just count what I have left and see if I get it right. So we've just done it into that 11th stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is going to be the next one we go into, the 10th.
Yep.
Remember, we skipped the first one, which would have been the 12th of the chain.
Mm-hmm.
We then went into the second one, which is the 11th. We're now going into the third one. So I'm inserting the hook. I'm grabbing my yarn now. I'm going to wrap around from the back to the front. And I'm going to slide up the first stitch, wrap around again, and slide around for the second 2 loops. And my second single crochet is complete.
Okay.
Once again, making sure that I'm going off in the right place because I tend to lose my place in this first row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to go into the 9th stitch, okay? Working my way back. Stab it, wrap around, slide off the first loop, wrap around, slide off the second 2, and I'm done with the next single crochet. And then again into the 8th one, stab it, wrap around from the back, take the first loop off, wrap around from the back, slide the next 2 loops off, and you're done with that single crochet. Open up the next one because you can see my tension is sliding now as I'm going down.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said don't worry about it being absolutely perfect, just make sure it's loose enough. Find the next one, you stab it, wrap it around, pull it through, wrap it around, pull it through.
Okay.
And then next one up, do it again, wrap it around, pull it through, wrap it around, pull it through, la la.
So it's always 1 and then 2.
It's always 1 and then 2 with the single crochet. Double crochet is a little different. Wrap it around. And the British called this a double crochet, so it gets really confusing when you're trying to interpret patterns.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize.
They call the US single crochet a double crochet. I don't know what they consider a single crochet. I'm going to go look that up. Probably a slip stitch. Okay.
Well, in my mind, it's more logical that this would be considered double crochet.
I can see why. I had the same confusion when I was first, because the second project I did was a double crochet scarf, which is essentially the same pattern, but the stitch is slightly different. And going on to the next one, and I've got one more to do, and then we'll take a look at what the row looks like.
Now the double crochet is a looser pattern, is that correct?
It's a more open pattern. I wouldn't say
open. Okay, because my mother mentioned that she's working on a baby blanket now that's double. Yep. She usually does them for the preemies. She does them as single.
Yeah, because there we go. All right, so I'm thinking that's the last one, but let's just count them just to be sure because Monica makes mistakes all the time. And you can see it pulls a little in like a half circle. And you know what that says to me? My original chain might not have been loose enough, but I've stretched it out. It seems okay. I think we're okay. So now let's count them. Now this time when we're counting, we're going to count these little V shapes at the top. So let me move it a little closer. You can kind of see these little loopy things on the top of the stitch. So the pattern, if this is when it's laying flat, but then we're going to turn it, and this is the edge. And if you look at these, each of these little loops here, those are the stitches.
Okay.
So now we're going to count them from the crochet hook. The hook's over here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, thank God. Because you know, mistakes. Okay, so we're going to flip it back around. Now, some people, we reach the end, right? We've gotten to the very end. to flip it, you could just do this. Thunk. And now we've got it at the correct side again, okay?
Okay.
I tend to make a mishmash of it and twist it all around and whatever. The other thing you're going to do next, some people will do will do a chain stitch now before they flip it. So they've just done that last double crochet or that last single crochet here. We just finished that. And then just to finish that row off, they'll do a chain stitch. So remember, the chain was just wrap it around and pull it through.
Okay, so just the single. Okay.
Yeah. So it just depends on your preference. I do it whenever I remember to do it, but you probably should do it before you flip it over.
Okay.
So now I'm on the other side. And I'm going to do the next row. And you can tell where the top and bottom is because the bottom is going to be where your little tail is from your slip knot.
Your fringe.
Your fringe. And your top is going to have those little V's along the edges for the stitches.
So it's basically you go rows, you go back and forth, back and forth.
Back and forth and back and forth.
Okay.
Now, unlike with knitting, there really isn't a wrong side. Some people like to keep track of what the first side was that they did, particularly if they're doing a really complicated pattern and they need to know right side, wrong side because of, you know, something they're doing in terms of, like, say if I was going to make one of those cute little pumpkins for fall, one way is to do it is make this more of a ribbed crochet. And with a ribbed crochet, you crochet into the back of the stitch. So you do this far side of this V, the outside of the V. That will leave this side to be a nice ribbing effect across the front. But for simpler patterns, it doesn't really matter. There is no right or wrong side. It just is what it is. So to remember what side is the right side, sometimes I'll put a stitch marker in and I'll use like a closed stitch marker so I know that that's the right side and I never take it off. So the next thing you're going to do, I've already done the chain stitch, so you're not going to go into the chain stitch. You're going to go into the very first single crochet from the last round. So that's going to be this right here. So here's the chain stitch, right, from before.
So you're going one in from it.
You're going one in from the chain stitch. And instead of, as you did when you were crocheting into the chain stitch, now you've got this two-piece thing up at the top, the V. You're going to want to catch both of those when you stab it. Okay? So I'm going to stab under those two. Okay?
Okay.
And they're both on the hook along with the yarn that was already there for my chain stitch. Okay? So now I've got 3 on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it around again. And again, I'm going further up. Don't do it from the hook because you want to be up in the wider spot. And then pull through the 2. And then wrap around again and pull through the 2.
Okay.
It wouldn't be horrible if you only pulled through 1. It just wouldn't be right for this pattern. If you only pull through the 1, you're going to get a ribbing effect. And that's okay, but it's not what we're making.
Okay. All right.
And so then you go on to the next, and again, here now I can really see I've got this double crochet that's in that first stitch. Now I'm going to go to the next stitch, and again, I'm making sure I'm stabbing under both of those parts of that stitch, the V. And I'm going to pull this a little tighter, and I'm going to wrap it around from the back, pull through those 2 pieces of that stitch, wrap it around, and pull through again.
Yeah.
And now I've got 2 of them. Now I'm going into the next one, and it's the same thing over and over again until I get to the end. So I can just keep pulling and pull it through, go to the next one, wrap around, pull through. Now, when I first begin, and so I can show you what I'm doing, I tend to grab the stitches here to slide them up and over. I also do that with really thin yarn. Like when I was working on the pod holder for Jill, which I haven't finished yet, Jill, but I'm almost done. Because the yarn's so thin, I kind of have to grab it with my little fingers to get it open over just right over the hook. Yarn nice and big like this and a hook like this, I don't really have to do that. I can just do this. I'm going to stab it, wrap it around, and then I can just pull, wrap around, pull, and it comes up and over. I don't actually have to handle each and every piece of the yarn.
Okay.
I just, so I could show you what I was doing. Otherwise I start going too fast and you can't see. So push it through, wrap it around, pull it, and pull it. And then, whoops, almost did a double crochet. That would have been embarrassing. Wrap it around, pull it through, wrap around, pull it through, and then.
Now, Monica, if you were doing a double crochet, would you be wrapping it twice? Is that what you do?
Yeah, I'd be wrapping it before I pushed it through.
Okay.
That's the big difference. Oops. My yarn's getting tight. Oh man. All right. All right. Well, here's a great place to show you what happens when you make a mistake. So I missed, and I'm going to pull this out, but I still have that last stitch I had before. I didn't lose it. Unlike knitting, when you drop stuff and you can't find it, if I was to lose it, this loop still sticks out. And even if I pulled it all the way out, I'd still see where I left off, because see, you can still see it. It pops right back up again.
Okay.
So it's easier not to lose your place with crochet. I've got to say, with knitting, it's a nightmare, but with crochet, it's pretty easy, which is nice when you're distracted. So stab it, wrap, pull, wrap, and pull, and then stab it, and then wrap and pull, and I need a little more yarn, wrap and pull. I'm on the last one, and I know that because my stitch marker is there, yay! And so I'm going to stab it, take out the stitch marker, I don't really need it, wrap it and pull, wrap it and pull. So now I got to the end, I'm going to flatten it out. Once again, kind of shows you, I probably made that chain, initial chain, a little too tight because it tends to want to curl, but it's not bad. I'm still pretty happy with it. And you can kind of see we've completed now the chain row and 2 rows of single crochet.
And you can start to see the pattern emerging.
Start to see the pattern emerging. And it's
That's fabulous.
Yeah. And so now this time, instead of chaining first, I'm going to flip first because I think I prefer it when I chain after I flip it. So I'm just going to flip. Whee. I'm not going to bother putting a stitch marker in because it just bothers me. I don't know. All right, so now I'm going to do that chain stitch. As long as you're doing a chain stitch before you start the row, I'm not sure it matters if you do it before or after you flip.
Okay.
The instructions.
But it's always the first thing you do as you start working on the row.
Right. And then you jump into that first double crochet stitch. So it's the second stitch after it's the first stitch after the chain stitch. You're going to stab into there, and it's all the same thing over and over again. And you're going to continue this through 2 skeins of yarn.
Okay.
You should always do a sanity check and count your stitches. Do I still have 11? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, yeah, because I counted the.
Okay, so you do that, like, do you do that every row pretty much? Pretty
much, because I don't trust myself.
Yeah.
And this is early days enough that if I make a mistake, I can easily back out and it's not going to hurt. What you don't want to do is get 13 rows down and realize, oh man, 13 rows back, I added an extra one. No wonder this looks weird. Or I missed one. No wonder this looks weird. You want to kind of keep an eye on it. And then you just keep going, you know, same as before, as you did before in your other rows. It's the same thing over and over again. This is a little loose. I don't like how loose that is. So just kind of jump right in, single crochet, go to the next one. But the first 2 rows are the trickiest. It's harder to hold it when you're just getting started because your yarn tends to want to curl around on itself. And eyeballing it and understanding where to stab the yarn, and that's when after you do that first row of chains, is a little bit trickier. But once you're past that, and no shame, man, the first time I did it like 5 times before I was happy with the way it looked. once you're past that, it really goes fast, and you don't even have to really pay attention. At one point I wasn't looking at it and I just kept going. You can just get a ton of it done, and before you know it, you've got an entire scarf.
That's moving really fast. Now that you've got a base or a foundation, it's really moving along quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been doing this for about a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't take long, and I'm going slow to explain it. And I'm really wanting to like rip it out because I feel like I went too tight on that chain stitch. And I'm probably wrong. It's probably, oops, I almost did a double crochet again. It's so stupid. Okay. And when I get to the end, I'm going to count because I feel like I might have gone too many. Okay, I think I've only got, hard to say. We'll see. And then we'll count and we'll see how many. I might have done too many stitches in the row. I'm not sure where I went wrong, but I think it was the previous row. Yeah, because I would think I would go in there. But maybe I don't need to. See what happens. All right, let's count them. I have a feeling I have too many. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, I have too many.
Okay.
So somewhere back here, I went one too many, a row back.
Okay.
And you just rip it out. And I think it might have been here, but I'm not sure. But you can, always just pick back up, know where you left off. Oh, here's where I want to stop. Or I can do this and go back.
I felt better when Holiday came to visit the other day, last weekend. And I felt better when she told me that she's been knitting for years. And she does knitting and crocheting, but she was knitting a sweater. And apparently she decided after she got 3/4 of the way through that she just didn't like the pattern. So she said she took the whole thing apart and unraveled it, and now she's making a different sweater with the yarn.
Well, that's kind of like what happened with the wrap I made for myself. I didn't like the way it came out. I gave it to Wembley as a dog blankie.
Yeah.
And
but I felt better when she said that. She said, yeah. She said, I was about 3/4 of the way through and I just didn't like it. She said, I spent a few nights just pulling the whole thing apart and started from scratch.
So I have 11 now, so that's correct.
Okay.
So at some point, I must have single crocheted into my loop somehow. I don't know how I did that, but I did. So anyway, let's do the chain and try to avoid that from happening again. So we'll chain 1, and then I'm going to go 1. It's going to happen again. I just know it. Maybe that's the problem.
Well, do you think it was doing the chain after you turn?
No, I think it happened before that. It happened in the row before.
Oh, all right.
So, if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, that should be fine. I think when I turn the corner again, I think I ended up with 12. Okay. I don't know why. All right, so let's just try to avoid problems again. 1, and we'll see if it happens. But this is why it's kind of cool to learn from a beginner, because you can kind of see the problems they run into and in real time, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And realize where your pitfalls are. My worst pitfall is missing one. I was worried about missing one, and I somehow ended up with too many. The last one I did, I just kind of shrugged it off. It happened early enough that I didn't care. Because I only made that mistake the one time. It was the same row.
And I bet your eye always goes to it.
It does. It's the reason I put fringe on that scarf. I wasn't planning to.
Yeah.
But it was the only way to balance it out. So, oops.
There was a master, a gentleman who was a master cross stitch artist, and he had been doing cross stitch for years. And he practiced, one of the things he said that was fabulous is he practiced under the concept of, apparently there's an American Indian concept that when you, in art, when you have mistakes, they're not mistakes, they're part of the larger tapestry of life. And you know, that life is imperfection.
Yeah, being so, you know, I went to college for graphic design and took a bunch of art appreciation classes, and most of the lectures, they all commented on that, you know.
Yeah,
And then even gave examples of artists that have documented mistakes that they've made and then reference them in artwork. It's very interesting if you research that. Yep.
It is, and well, and it made me feel better for all those dropped stitches. I thought I feel better about them.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese, where they actually highlight the mistakes when something's broken by
Yeah.
in gold. So here, there's some sort of mistake going on here. I might have accidentally double crocheted, and that's why it's sticking out a little bit too much.
Okay.
There's definitely a problem going on here, so I'll probably do this row again. But let's just count and make sure I didn't do too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Okay.
So I think I counted, I did something into the chain stitch on another way around at some point, and that's what screwed it up. But, you know, like I said, don't be afraid to go in and go out again, and it's going to feel awful and excruciating, and you're like, I hate this. I have to keep doing it over and over again. But the reality is you're going to reach a point where you don't have to do that anymore. Everything's fine, and everything else will go much faster. And it's worth it to tear it out if it's bothering you, because your eye's going to go to it forever if you don't fix it. And so each row, it's worth it to go through and count and to examine your stitches and see if there's anything that's hugely bothering you, and rip out that row if it is.
Okay. Yep.
And that's it. It is really easy.
That's great. This was a great first lesson, Monica. It really was.
You know, I can switch hooks, which apparently I did in the middle of all this. But super easy, super fun. You know, if you make a mistake, you usually see it right away.
Yeah.
If you see it, you probably won't see it later either, so don't worry about it. But count the stitches at first, at least at first, and just make sure that you didn't skip one or add one too many like I just did. You know, just to make sure you're starting on a nice foundation.
Yeah.
And then chances are, as you get further along, you're going to see the shape of the scarf well enough that you're not going to make those mistakes, because you'll spot them right away. So really, really quick and easy. A lot of repetition once you get past the first 2 rows. It's all repetition. And then when you get to the end, let me know and I can talk you through it. But I also provided the instructions on that Word doc of what to do at the end. When you get unlike with knitting, where you have to cast off the stitches off of the needles, crochet, you get to the end, you're happy with your length, you just stop. It's not that hard. The last one, instead of doing the chain stitch and turning it over, you do the chain stitch and pull the yarn for as long as you want it to be and cut it there and pull it tight. That's the end.
Okay. All right. So basically you make another piece of fringe.
You're basically making another piece of fringe. At the end of the final row, chain 1 and keep pulling the yarn through to fringe length, which is about the length of your hand.
Yep.
Cut it off. And then to add fringe, you know, if you're not going to want fringe, that's one thing. But to add optional fringe, you're just going to measure the yarn. Measure the yarn against your hand, from your middle finger, tip of your middle finger down to your wrist, and then double that. And that's probably a good length for your fringe.
Ah, okay.
And you're going to loop it through. So let's say this was it, right? Here's my chain row that I did. Just loop it through the first one where your fringe is. And then you're going to have probably 3 of these in your hand, 3 of these little double loops, 2 or 3, probably 3. And then you're just going to loop it over and pull it through.
Ah, perfect. Okay.
And that'll make your fringe like that.
Oh, all right.
And I would skip every other stitch. I mean, if you like a lot of fringe, it's your own business how much you want to put on. But I skipped every other stitch and just did enough for that. And actually, I stopped my row long enough, my scarf long enough for the first single crochet one, that I didn't need the 3rd ball of yarn. I did it with what was left of my 2nd ball of yarn. So
Okay.
it came out just fine. For the double crochet, I used all my yarn, so I needed to break into another ball.
Yeah, I got 3 skeins because I didn't know.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Well, and it's nice to have a really nice long scarf because you want to double it around and whatever. So I like a long scarf. So I thought I was going to need all 3, but like I said, for the black one that I did, I don't even know if I had the 3 skeins of it. And I could have bought another one because I bought it at the local yarn shop, but I thought, you know, it doesn't need to be this long. And then I just made just enough fringe. It was just enough. It was perfect. And then for the double crochet one, I liked the edge. I did the end really nice, and I didn't end up putting fringe on it. So it's just your own personal preference. But pretty simple. So, and the only thing I didn't teach you that you'll need to know to do this on your own in case you want to finish it over the weekend or something is when you need to add the 2nd ball of yarn.
Yeah.
So some people get really super fancy with it and weave in the end so that there's no knot in the middle. But you know, you can knock yourself out to do that, and it could end up that the yarn that you bought already has knots in it because when they were winding it on the ball, it ran out and they added another. So in the end, it's not a huge deal if there's a knot. You just have to kind of be careful when you're knitting or crocheting around it that it doesn't show up really well.
Okay.
And so I knot it, and then when I cut the ends off, I weave in those ends into the body of it using a tapestry needle, which I probably have one handy that I can show you what that is, or a smaller crochet hook, and just kind of weave it into the body of the scarf.
Because you just don't want it to unravel, basically.
You don't want it to show. You don't want like pieces of yarn sticking out every which way. But you don't. So this is a tapestry needle. It's kind of a blunt-ended needle.
Okay.
It has a big enough head that you can usually like try to fit the yarn in there. It is.
So how much do you weave it, Monica? Like how many passes do you do through?
There are videos on weaving yarn. I will usually kind of weave it up and over and in and down again and up and over and, until I feel confident that it's not going to fly back out again. Some yarn takes to it better than others. Some people use this stiffening agent, fabric stiffener, whatever it's called, that they spray onto it. It doesn't need to be that complicated. If a piece sticks out, you snip it a little. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I didn't show you. And your mom probably knows how to change out yarn.
Yeah. No, I'm sure she does. And actually what you just described though makes a lot of sense. And that seems very self-explanatory to me.
Yeah, I mean, where I would be nervous is if I wasn't knotting it. Some people don't knot it, they weave it in and under, and making that pass from the old yarn to the new yarn is tricky.
Okay. Yeah, knotting it makes sense to me. I didn't realize that in the middle of a skein of yarn it could be knotted.
Yeah, Lion Brand did it, but so did I think it's Cascade Yarns Aegean. I ran into that, and I was so mad because that was an expensive yarn, and I didn't think that would happen with the more expensive yarns. But it does. And the other expensive yarn I used was Papyrus, which is a cotton silk blend, and it happened with that too. So I'm not experienced enough to know, but now I'm starting to see it. And now this was an El Cheapo, what brand is it? I think I still have the wrapper over here somewhere. Yes, it's called Red Heart Chic Sheep.
Okay.
So Red Heart is like a department store brand.
Yeah, my mother's used Red Heart before.
Yeah, I did not have one knot in this entire skein
Okay.
of black yarn. So I don't know what it has to do with, but it's, oh, this is so soft. Oh my God.
Do you buy most of yours at Joann's or?
I do end up buying it mostly at Joann, not on purpose, because like I just got a delivery from, another company too, but the vast majority I've bought from Joann because they're usually having a sale, and I have coupons on top of that. And in the end, I end up with vast quantities of certain yarns, and Joann had the best price, and that's including buying direct from Lion Brand with a coupon.
Yeah.
So, I find Joann has the best prices in most cases. Every once in a while, Michael's will have a sale, but their selection hasn't been as good lately. There's a company called Webs. It's yarn.com. They've got a really great selection, especially if you're looking for like all wool or all cotton or whatever. And their prices are okay because if you're buying in quantities, you get like 20% off. And then if you buy over a certain amount, it's 25% off. And then over a certain amount, and it's 30% off. And that's on top of any sale prices. That's on top of any coupons. So Webs is usually less expensive than you think it's going to be once you get to the checkout. So that's another good one that I think I bought this actually through Webs. I bought the first 2 skeins of it at the local yarn shop, and then I bought more of it at Webs because I love the color. I thought it was so beautiful. So yeah, I mean, you get to a point where you get addicted to the yarn and have no idea what you're going to make with it. You just want that yarn because it's so soft and beautiful and colorful, and you love it.
Oh yeah, I know that whole thing.
And it's bad because
Yep.
you don't know if you have enough yarn to make anything. So then you buy more of it. You buy like 12 of them, 12 skeins of it, and it probably costs you like $120. But you might want to make a blanket out of it, or you might want to make like an oversized sweater out of it. You don't want to run out of yarn. And the next thing you know, you spend way more than your budget, and you're really sorry you did that.
I've done this with jewelry making. I've done this with painting. I've done this with cross stitch. Yeah, no, I know all about it. It's called hobby addiction.
It's bad. And fabric, I was the same way with fabric.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know what project you were going to do. You had to buy double what you thought you were going to need. It's just how it goes, and it's a bad spiral.
Oh, yeah.
So I've tried to be really good about planning what the project's going to be before I buy the yarn, and I get about a week in, and then I'm back to my old habits. So just to warn you if you get into this. And like I said, the crochet, it's addictive because it's enjoyable. There's something very hypnotic about stabbing, wrap, grab, wrap, grab. It just...
And we're getting into the weather now, for me anyway, where this is like the perfect type of thing to do in the evening, sitting in front of the wood stove.
Mm-hmm.
It's relaxing, it's rhythmic. You can really zone out as you do it.
And using the thicker yarn, before you know it, you'll have, a half dozen scarves done and ready to, ship them to friends and family for the holidays.
I was just going to say, I think everyone's going to get a scarf this year for the holidays.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the hats. The hats actually go a lot faster. Once I got into the pattern and figured it out, because the patterns were a little tricky. My friend Sarah's making a hat a day.
Okay.
She just sits through board meetings and makes hats, over and over again. And, if you're making granny squares like Andrea is, when you're done, you can piece them together and make something.
I was just going to say, I've seen hats made out of granny squares that are kind of fun.
Yep. So, if you get addicted to that, and the nice thing about those is you can just use whatever random yarn you have if you're out of it. And you can change up the colors whenever you want. And then the next thing you know, you've got this multicolored crazy quilt type of item that you've made, and it kind of looks like you meant to do that. So I don't particularly like that look. That's not my aesthetic. I don't enjoy it. So I don't know that I'm going to get into that, but I will tell you this Afghan I did in triangles, and I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun.
It went really quickly too, Monica.
It did. And remember, the only things that I had made before I made that, I made this scarf that I'm showing you how to make now. I made the double crochet scarf, which is very, very similar. And then I made a purse, which I never finished because I didn't like the way it looked. I got teased. My sister said it looked like a big yellow dishcloth, and it made me sad. I didn't finish it.
I thought it was so pretty.
Too. So
I thought I disagree with your sister. I thought it was really pretty.
I think I needed to just finish it and put it to bed, and I will. You know, it's actually still on my coffee table in its little project bag. Oh, that's the other trick I wanted to share with you guys. So when you're working on something, you want to have someplace you're keeping it, because you might be working on multiple projects. And so you can put them in a nice drawstring bag, like a fabric drawstring bag. And that's neat because you can keep the yarn in there and keep your pets from chasing your yarn, and just have the yarn coming out the top where the drawstring is.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're done not working on it, you can stuff your project back in the bag. And what I usually do is when I take it off the hook, I'll loop one of these through it, or a paper clip, if you will, and then pull that tight so I don't lose my place.
Okay, and then you know where you left off.
I know where I left off, and then I can pull it back out again and stick my hook back through when I'm ready to pick it back up again.
Okay.
So that's how I kind of keep track of where I left off. Don't pull it too tight because it'll pull all the way through, but you know, just kind of, or you could kind of loop it around here too to kind of keep it in place. Just loosely, you know, it's not Fort Knox. A smart cat could probably get it out, but you know, just to kind of keep it from falling. And then, you know, put it in your project bag together. Now I've got a few different project bags. I've got one that's really, really fancy. I'm not suggesting you need a fancy one. Like this backpack is so cool because I've got this fun little thing. It says Stitch on it. I don't know if you can tell. It's magnetic. So my scissors and some of my stitch.
If you stop sharing the document, we can see better.
You can always pin, you can click on that thing
Okay, thanks.
and see her photo, and then you hit the pin button, and then it flips to.
Oh, that is great. So
Oh,
everything
that's
is
neat,
it's
yeah.
magnetically adhering to it.
Yeah.
What a great idea.
And then inside, so I'm going to take my other yarn out of here. So inside, it actually has this flap here, and see how it has like these openings in it?
So you can feed the yarn through.
The yarn through it, yeah, which is kind of handy because it keeps your tension even. So it has this nice pocket for one project, and then it's got other pockets where you can put your other projects in. So when I was working on that Afghan, I was taking it to the hospital with me to visit my grandmother, and I had the one part that I had finished in one pocket, and then I had a few of the other triangles that I had started that didn't fit because I had to do the magic and I need to watch the video to do it. So I started the rest of them but didn't finish them and put them in. And then I had the other pocket for like my wallet and stuff like that.
That's great.
That's good.
So they make fancy ones, but when I first started out, I was just using little drawstring bags.
Yeah.
Nobody's leaving home right now, so.
Yeah. Now that we've got old cats, I gave my mother an African basket that she keeps hers in.
That's neat.
When we get kittens, we're gonna have to have something that closes.
Well,
Yeah.
there's pottery. I know she's not doing it anymore, but you know, a lot of pottery people are making yarn bowls,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and those are really cool.
Yeah.
You know, just to kind of feed the yarn through. I have a fabric yarn bowl, and instead of a loop through it, they've made a leather loop that snaps, and you feed your yarn through that.
Okay.
It's fun. It's puffed, so I can uncuff it and fold it up, and it gives you a place to put the project as well as the yarn.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea.
Yeah, there's fun little tricks and tools, but as my grandmother says, much like with knitting, where all you need is 2 sticks and some string.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a $4 plastic stick and some yarn, and it's helpful to have a stitch marker, but you don't need one. You can use
Well, the neat thing is, it's so easy to redo. Like you can, you know, like some crafts, you know, I love to paint and things like that, but
There's no going back.
yeah. So
But
it's
this,
very
at least
easy.
you can go back and
Yeah.
try to address.
So I'm excited to try to get my supplies this weekend and try it. So
Yeah, I'm excited. That's what I'll be doing this evening, is starting.